Jennifer Carter had always believed in the fairy tale that her life had become. She was married to Dr. Samuel Carter, a respected and highly successful cardiac surgeon. Their home, tucked away in a quiet suburban neighborhood, was the epitome of comfort and warmth. A colonial-style house with a sprawling front yard, manicured hedges, and a white picket fence that seemed straight out of a dream. It was a home where laughter filled the rooms and where their 3 children, Emma, Max, and Lily, grew up surrounded by love and the promise of a bright future. For 15 years, Jennifer had been Samuel's unwavering supporter. She was the heart of their home, the one who kept everything in order, from the kids' schedules to planning their vacations. Her life was a constant dance of balancing Samuel's demanding career and her family's needs, all while maintaining the role of the perfect wife. Samuel was the shining star, the one everyone turned to for medical expertise, and she was the silent partner, managing the household and keeping up appearances. Jennifer had never once doubted that their marriage was built on mutual respect, admiration, and, above all, love. She had trusted Samuel implicitly. He was a brilliant doctor, a loving father, and a husband who, in Jennifer's eyes, was always there when it mattered most. She watched him work long hours at the hospital, knowing that the long shifts and sleepless nights were for the greater good, that he was saving lives and making a difference. They had the life everyone envied, the life they had built together. There was no reason to question anything. She had her perfect family, her perfect husband, and a future that seemed as unbreakable as the foundation of their home. But, like all things that seemed too perfect to be true, cracks began to appear, though Jennifer was too blind to see them at first. There were the little things she'd brushed off, the moments when Samuel seemed distant, when his usual warmth toward her faded just a little. The long hours at work, the phone calls that had become more frequent and more secretive. But Jennifer, ever the optimist, convinced herself it was just stress from his busy career. It wasn't until the quiet moments between them became more frequent that she began to feel something shift, something she couldn't quite put her finger on. Still, she chose not to dwell on it, unwilling to disrupt the image of their life she had carefully curated in her mind. Then, one winter morning, everything changed. It was a Tuesday, a typical morning in the Carter household. The children were getting ready for school, and Samuel was leaving for his usual early rounds at the hospital. As Jennifer helped the kids gather their things, she noticed Samuel's coat, still draped over the chair in the living room. He was always so meticulous about his things, and it seemed odd that he hadn't taken it with him. As she picked it up to hang it in the closet, something caught her eye. There, tucked into the inner pocket, was a small, manila envelope. It was unusual for Samuel to leave anything in his coat pocket. He was the type of person who kept things organized, who made sure nothing was left behind. So, curiosity got the best of Jennifer, and she slid her fingers inside, pulling out the envelope. The first thing she noticed was that it didn't have a return address, and the handwriting on the front was not Samuel's. It was an unfamiliar script, hurried and scrawled, but the sharpness of the letters sent a chill down her spine. She hesitated for a moment, feeling the weight of the envelope in her hands. But she couldn't shake the feeling that she had to know what it contained. Her hands trembled as she opened it, carefully tearing the flap. Inside was a single sheet of paper, a medical report. The letterhead was unfamiliar, an obscure fertility clinic she had never heard of before. The title of the report sent a shock through her body: paternity test results. Her heart began to race as she scanned the document. The words blurred before her eyes, but as she read further, her blood ran cold. The report indicated that Samuel Carter was not the biological father of their children. The room seemed to close in around her as she absorbed the words on the paper. Her mind couldn't quite comprehend what she was reading. Samuel, her husband, the father of her children, had not fathered any of them. The report went on to mention the use of a sperm donor for the IVF procedures they had gone through to conceive their children. It was a detail she had never questioned before, something they had never discussed. Samuel had always been so open about their desire to have children. How could this be possible? What had Samuel done? The very foundation of her life, the life she had meticulously built, was crumbling before her eyes. Jennifer's breath quickened, and she could feel the world spinning around her. The envelope fell from her hands as she staggered backward, the weight of the discovery sinking in like a stone. She couldn't breathe, couldn't think. The love and trust she had placed in Samuel seemed to dissolve in an instant, replaced by a feeling of betrayal so deep it made her stomach churn. For 15 years, she had believed that Samuel had been her partner in everything. How could he have kept this secret from her? How could he have lied about something so monumental? Everything she had believed about her marriage, about her family, was now in question. Her perfect life was a lie. Jennifer stood there in the middle of the living room, her mind reeling, trying to piece together the shattered fragments of her life. But no matter how hard she tried, the truth was undeniable. Samuel had not only betrayed her trust with an affair, but had also kept the most painful secret of all. And now, as she stood frozen in that moment, she realized that the perfect family she had fought so hard to build had been nothing more than an illusion. The realization hit her like a wave, and for the first time in years, Jennifer felt completely and utterly alone. Over the years, Jennifer had grown accustomed to the demands of Samuel's career. She knew that his work as a surgeon often kept him away from home, late into the evenings, and on weekends when others enjoyed time with their families. But it was all for the greater good, she told herself. He was saving lives after all. And in her mind, that made it all worth it. Still, in the back of her mind, she began to notice small things, things that, at the time, seemed trivial or easily explained away. The first sign came when Samuel started working even longer hours at the hospital. She had always known his schedule was demanding, but it became more extreme in the last year. He would come home late, sometimes not until after the children were asleep, and when he did, he was exhausted. The energy that had once been reserved for their family was no longer there. Instead, he would retreat to the guest room, claiming he needed sleep after a long day, and the distance between them began to grow. Jennifer tried to be understanding, reasoning that his new responsibilities as head of cardiac surgery were weighing on him. She knew how much he had wanted that promotion, how much pressure came with the title. But even as she reassured herself, she couldn't ignore the subtle shift in their relationship. The conversations that once flowed easily now felt more strained. They no longer spoke about their dreams or their plans for the future. Instead, their talks had become limited to mundane tasks, coordinating schedules, discussing the kids' school activities, planning social events. There were no more late-night chats, no more laughter shared over a glass of wine. She had long prided herself on being a supportive wife, never demanding too much of him, always putting the family's needs first. But she couldn't help but feel an ache every time Samuel withdrew into himself. She had tried to talk to him about it on a few occasions, but each time he brushed it off, saying that work was just demanding and that everything would settle down eventually. So, Jennifer let it go, convincing herself that it was a passing phase. His emotional withdrawal wasn't personal, it was just the stress of his job, and soon enough, things would return to normal. But as the months passed, the distance between them only grew. His phone became an even bigger point of focus. Samuel had always been protective of his phone, which didn't bother Jennifer at first. He had always been the type to keep his personal life separate from work, and she respected that boundary. But then, it started to become more noticeable. Samuel would leave his phone on silent, face down on the kitchen counter, or he would take calls in the other room, his voice lowered, as if he didn't want her to hear what he was saying. Jennifer would glance over at him, a nagging feeling tugging at her, but each time, he would reassure her that it was just work. "You know how it is at the hospital," he would say, his tone soft but distant. Still, something felt off. She had always trusted Samuel, always believed in their bond, but now, she found herself second-guessing the way he was acting. The way his eyes avoided her sometimes, the way he became distracted when they were together, his reluctance to touch her or spend time with her. It wasn't just the physical distance, it was emotional. She couldn't help but wonder if there was something, or someone, else taking up his attention. Then came the night when it all came to a head. Samuel had been working late again, and Jennifer had tucked the kids into bed, as usual. She found herself lying in their bed, wide awake, listening to the quiet hum of the house. Samuel's footsteps echoed as he walked down the hallway, heading for the study, where he often retreated after a long day. He had promised her they would catch up, but as usual, he was buried in his work. Jennifer sighed softly, but her eyes couldn't help but wander toward his phone, lying unattended on the nightstand. It was an impulse, one she hadn't planned for. She wasn't the type to snoop, but something in her gut told her that she had to know what was going on. She picked up the phone and unlocked it, the screen lighting up in the dark. The first thing she saw was a message notification from an unfamiliar name. "I can't wait to see you tonight, baby. You were incredible last time." Jennifer's heart skipped a beat. She stared at the screen, unsure of what to do. Her hands trembled as she opened the message thread, her breath catching in her throat as she scrolled through the conversations. The texts were flirtatious, intimate, and full of references to late-night meetings, rendezvous, and promises of more. Her mind raced. Who was this woman? The name didn't ring a bell, but the tone of the messages was unmistakable. They were more than just friendly exchanges. They were proof of something Jennifer had long suspected, but never had the courage to confront. The feeling in her gut, the one she had been ignoring for months, was right. Samuel had been having an affair. The world she had so carefully built around her shattered in that moment, but she didn't move. She couldn't. The phone slipped from her fingers and landed softly on the bed beside her. The realization hit her like a freight train, and for a moment, all she could do was stare at the ceiling. Her mind was reeling, her chest tightening as the enormity of what she had just discovered sank in. She wanted to scream, to confront him right then and there, but she couldn't bring herself to. She wasn't ready to face the truth, not yet. So, she did the only thing she could do. She replaced the phone on the nightstand, pulled the covers over her head, and tried to pretend that everything was normal. But deep down, Jennifer knew that nothing would ever be the same again. The walls she had built around her marriage were crumbling, and she was powerless to stop it. The man she had trusted, the man she had loved, had betrayed her in the most profound way imaginable. And now, the only thing left to do was face the truth, no matter how painful it might be. Jennifer's hands trembled as she sat on the edge of their bed, Samuel's phone open in front of her. The familiar phone number flashing on the screen didn't mean anything to her at first, but as she unlocked the device, she could feel her pulse quicken. Her mind screamed at her to stop, to put the phone back and pretend she had never seen anything, but something inside her urged her forward, a sick feeling twisting in her gut. The message from Jessica was the first thing that caught her eye. At first, Jennifer didn't understand. She stared at the words, trying to make sense of them. The message, casually intimate, didn't seem out of the ordinary at first glance, but as her eyes moved down the thread, the reality began to settle in. The messages were explicit. They detailed romantic weekends away, whispered promises, and longing declarations that no wife should ever read. They spoke of late-night rendezvous, of secret encounters and stolen moments that had been kept from her for months. Jennifer's chest tightened as she read Jessica's words, each one digging deeper into the wound that was already forming in her heart. Her mind raced, her thoughts a blur. She had known something was wrong, felt it in the silence that had crept into their home, the way Samuel had become distant, the way he would retreat into his work or his phone. But this was proof, cold and undeniable. Samuel had been having an affair. For months. She had trusted him, loved him with everything she had, and now, all of it, every ounce of faith, was shattered. The realization settled into her stomach like a heavy stone. Their life together, the one she had believed in, the one she had devoted herself to, was nothing but a lie. She couldn't breathe. The phone slipped from her fingers, landing softly on the bed as Jennifer sat frozen in the middle of their room. The words from the messages replayed in her mind. The dates, the trips, the photos, none of it seemed real. How had she missed it? How had she allowed herself to believe that everything was fine when it had all been falling apart right under her nose? The anger bubbled up, quick and hot, but there was something else, something deeper, something darker that had taken root in her chest. It was betrayal, the kind that made her feel as though she had been punched in the gut, left gasping for air. The shower stopped, and she could hear the sound of the water turning off, followed by the soft thud of the bathroom door opening. Her heart pounded in her chest as she fought to compose herself. She couldn't let him see her like this, couldn't let him know that she had already uncovered the truth. But it was too late. The truth was already in the room, and it was suffocating her. Samuel walked into the bedroom, his towel wrapped loosely around his waist, his hair still damp. He didn't notice her immediately, his attention focused elsewhere. She could barely look at him, the man she had once trusted so completely, now nothing more than a stranger in her eyes. When he finally turned to face her, his expression shifted, as if sensing something was wrong. "What's going on?" he asked, his voice calm, almost indifferent. Jennifer stood, her legs shaky beneath her, her voice steady, though her heart felt as though it was about to shatter. "I found something," she said quietly, holding up his phone. His face drained of color as he saw the screen. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The silence in the room felt thick, almost suffocating. "Samuel," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "How long?" He seemed to hesitate, the words not coming immediately, but then he let out a sigh, a sound so devoid of emotion that it chilled her to the core. "It was a mistake, Jennifer. I didn't mean for it to happen." A rush of anger surged through her, but she couldn't find the words to express it. "How long, Samuel?" she repeated, her voice trembling now. He looked at her, his gaze cold and distant. "Months. But it doesn't matter. It's over now." Jennifer's world seemed to collapse in that instant. Months. All those moments they had shared, the times he had told her he was too tired, too busy. It had all been a lie. She felt the tears begin to sting her eyes, but she blinked them away. "You're asking for a divorce, aren't you?" she asked, her voice barely audible, though the question had already been answered in her heart. He nodded, his face devoid of any emotion. "I'm not in love with you anymore, Jennifer. It's over. I want out." Her heart shattered then. The man she had loved, the father of her children, the person she had given everything to, was coldly telling her that it was over. There was no apology, no remorse, only a detached finality. As the words sank in, Jennifer realized that nothing would ever be the same again. Her marriage, her family, her entire life had just come to an end. The days following Samuel's confession were a blur for Jennifer. She had expected pain, anger, betrayal, but the coldness of his response had shattered her in ways she couldn't have imagined. It was one thing to discover the affair, to feel the shock of it, but it was another to see the man she had loved for so long standing in front of her, so indifferent, so detached. He didn't care. He wasn't even sorry. In his eyes, the marriage was over, and with it, everything they had built together. Samuel had demanded the divorce immediately, making it clear that he had no intention of fighting for their marriage. His words cut through her like a knife. "I'm done, Jennifer. I want out," he had said, his face unreadable. It wasn't a request, it was a cold, final declaration. Jennifer had never imagined their relationship would end like this, not with a fight, not with passion, but with a businesslike detachment that left her feeling hollow and empty. Though she felt her heart breaking with every word, she knew one thing: she wasn't going to let him get away with this. She wasn't going to let him walk away without facing the consequences of what he had done. Jennifer knew the divorce was inevitable, but it didn't have to be a simple, clean break. He had betrayed her trust in ways that went beyond an affair. He had lied to her, manipulated her, and hidden secrets she hadn't even begun to imagine. So, Jennifer hired a lawyer. She needed someone who could help her navigate the storm that Samuel was about to unleash. She felt the weight of the legal proceedings bearing down on her, but she was determined. If Samuel thought he could walk away with a clean slate, he was wrong. As she began to sift through their financial records, Jennifer's unease grew. She had always trusted Samuel to handle their finances, believing that they were in a stable, secure position. But as she pored over the accounts, something didn't sit right. There were large withdrawals, some of them nearly six figures, all going to an entity called Greenwood Ventures. Jennifer's heart sank as she examined the records. The company was registered in Samuel's name. There were no explanations, no invoices, just the steady flow of money from their joint accounts into this mysterious business. Her hands shook as she flipped through the pages, trying to make sense of it. Greenwood Ventures was not something Jennifer had ever heard of, and yet Samuel had been transferring large amounts of money into it for the past year. The more she looked, the more questions arose. What was this company? What was Samuel involved in? It didn't make sense. Samuel had never mentioned a business venture, never given any indication that he was involved in anything beyond his work at the hospital. The more Jennifer uncovered, the clearer it became that the betrayal went far deeper than an affair. Her mind raced with the possibilities. Had Samuel been hiding money from her? Was he involved in something illegal? She couldn't help but wonder if this was part of a larger plan, a way for him to escape without taking responsibility for the damage he had done. She felt sick to her stomach. The man she had trusted with everything, with their finances, their future, had been lying to her for so long. It was no longer just about infidelity. It was about his complete disregard for her, his deception on a scale she hadn't even begun to comprehend. But Jennifer couldn't afford to get lost in the whirlwind of emotions that threatened to consume her. She had to remain calm, for the sake of their children, for the sake of her future. She couldn't let this destroy her. Samuel's betrayal had torn apart everything she thought she knew about him, but she still had control over one thing: how she moved forward. The investigation into Samuel's finances continued, each new discovery pulling Jennifer deeper into a world she never knew existed. As she gathered evidence, she focused on the children. They were the only thing that mattered now. She could feel the weight of the impending divorce looming over them, but she promised herself she would protect them from the chaos that Samuel had created. She would be their rock, the one constant in the storm. As Jennifer moved forward with her plan, the anger she felt was tempered by a sense of clarity. She would make sure Samuel faced the consequences of his actions. She would not let him walk away unscathed. The emotional toll of the situation was immense, but Jennifer knew she had no choice but to keep going. She had to finish what she had started, for herself, for her children, and for the life she was going to build out of the wreckage of her marriage. Jennifer stood in front of the mirror, staring at her reflection as she adjusted the collar of her jacket. Her mind was a whirlwind of emotions, but she knew this was the moment she had been preparing for. The truth had been buried for too long, and now it was time for Samuel to face the consequences of his lies. She had discovered everything: the affair, the hidden finances, the manipulation. But there was one final piece to the puzzle, one truth so devastating that it would shatter whatever semblance of control Samuel thought he still had. For years, Jennifer had believed that their children, Emma, Max, and Lily, were the product of their love and their struggles to have a family. She had never questioned the IVF treatments, the long months of waiting, the heartbreaking miscarriages. When they finally had their children, it felt like a miracle, a gift from the universe. But the more she uncovered, the more she realized how carefully Samuel had orchestrated their lives, ensuring that no one, not even Jennifer, would ever discover the truth. Jennifer had learned that Samuel's decision to undergo IVF wasn't solely about wanting a family. It was about control, about fear. He had a hereditary heart condition, hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, and he feared passing it on to his children. Instead of using his own sperm to fertilize the eggs, Samuel had arranged for anonymous donors to provide the genetic material. Jennifer had spent hours poring over medical records, meeting with doctors, and speaking with former colleagues of Samuel's, slowly piecing together the horrifying truth. Samuel had tampered with their IVF procedures, ensuring his genetic contribution was excluded entirely, all to protect himself from the possibility of passing on his condition. It was a betrayal that went far beyond infidelity or financial deceit. Samuel had denied her the very essence of their relationship, the biological connection to their children. He had made a decision that affected every part of their family, every part of their future, all without her knowledge or consent. It wasn't just a secret. It was a lie so deep that Jennifer's trust in him had been completely obliterated. Now, with the DNA test results in hand, Jennifer had a plan. She had arranged a meeting with Samuel, but not just any meeting. This would be the final confrontation, the moment when he would realize that Jennifer knew everything, all the secrets, all the lies, every betrayal he had thought he had hidden so carefully. And to make it even more poignant, She had arranged the meeting at their favorite restaurant, the one they had celebrated anniversaries at, the one where he was now celebrating his divorce with his mistress. When Jennifer walked into the restaurant, she felt a strange sense of calm. She had anticipated this moment for weeks, yet now that it was finally here, she was remarkably composed. She sat at the table, her fingers lightly touching the envelope containing the DNA test results. She could see Samuel across the room, his arm draped around his mistress, his smug smile evident even from a distance. He thought he had won. He thought this was the end of it, that Jennifer would simply walk away, defeated. But Jennifer wasn't the woman she had been. She wasn't going to let him win. When Samuel and his mistress finally approached the table, he didn't look surprised to see her. He had likely assumed she was coming to plead, to beg for a reconciliation. But instead, Jennifer sat tall, her posture firm, as she slid the envelope across the table. "Congratulations on your freedom, Samuel," she said, her voice calm but edged with a finality that cut through the air. "I think you'll find this interesting." Samuel looked down at the envelope, his expression shifting slightly, though his confidence remained intact. He reached for it, opening it without hesitation, convinced it was just more of her futile attempts to salvage something from their marriage. But as he read the DNA test results, his expression faltered. His eyes widened, and the smugness he had carried with him for so long vanished in an instant. The results were clear. Samuel Carter is not the biological father of the children. The words hit him like a freight train, and for the first time in years, he was speechless. His hands trembled as he lowered the paper, staring at Jennifer in disbelief, the truth slowly sinking in. "You had no idea, did you?" Jennifer said softly, watching as his face went from shock to pure horror. "You've been living in a lie for so long, Samuel, and now, the truth is finally here." He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. His mind was reeling, trying to process the devastation. The man who had built a life around control, around his own image of success, was now faced with the unraveling of everything he had carefully constructed. His affair, his finances, his manipulations, they were all just the surface. The core of his betrayal lay in the fact that he had denied Jennifer, his wife, the right to know the truth about their children. And now, with the DNA results in front of him, he had no choice but to confront it. As the realization washed over him, Jennifer remained calm, watching him with a sense of cold satisfaction. This was the moment she had been waiting for, the moment when Samuel would finally understand that his actions had consequences. The truth could no longer be hidden. The days following the confrontation felt surreal to Jennifer. Samuel had tried to downplay the situation, dismissing her revelations as a desperate attempt to salvage something from their broken marriage. His voice was calm, almost condescending, as he attempted to brush off the weight of the truth. He muttered that she was overreacting, that the affair didn't matter anymore, that the past was in the past. But Jennifer saw through the facade. His words were hollow, and deep down, Samuel knew he had been caught. The smugness he had carried for so long had vanished, replaced by a flicker of uncertainty that he couldn't hide. He tried to salvage what remained of his reputation, but it was clear that the truth had shattered his carefully crafted image. Samuel had spent years building a life of prestige and admiration in the medical community. He was a celebrated surgeon, known for his skill and success, respected by colleagues and admired by patients. But all of that was about to crumble. The affair, the hidden finances, the tampering with IVF, it all came to light. The man who had once been untouchable was now exposed as a liar and a fraud. The hospital board was quickly informed, and an investigation was launched into Samuel's actions. His medical license was suspended, pending the results of the inquiry, and the hospital distanced itself from him, distancing the institution from the scandal that had unfolded. The public once revered him, but now they saw him for what he truly was. His colleagues who had once praised him now spoke in hushed tones, their admiration replaced by disgust and disbelief. The career he had worked so hard to build, the reputation he had carefully nurtured, all of it was gone in a matter of days. As the financial investigations into Greenwood Ventures began, the extent of Samuel's deceit was revealed. The company, which had once seemed like a simple business venture, turned out to be a front for money laundering and financial mismanagement. Millions of dollars had been siphoned off through this entity, funds that were meant for his family, for his children. Samuel had been so focused on securing his own future that he had failed to realize how deeply he was digging himself into a hole. Now, with the truth exposed, the authorities were moving in, and the financial fallout was inevitable. For Jennifer, the sight of Samuel's fall from grace was not one of vengeance. She had no desire to watch him suffer. The satisfaction she felt was not rooted in revenge, but in the realization that she had taken back control. For so long, she had lived in his shadow, playing the role of the perfect wife, the dutiful mother. But now she was free. She had taken back her life, her power, and her future. The divorce was finalized, and Samuel was left with nothing. His reputation, career, and family were all destroyed. Jennifer had won in a way that went beyond the courtroom or the bank accounts. She had reclaimed her life and her children's future. As she looked forward, she knew the road ahead would be challenging, but she also knew that she was no longer afraid. She had faced the truth, and in doing so, she had become stronger than she ever thought possible. The darkness of the past was now behind her, and ahead lay a future she could shape on her own terms. Jennifer stood at the edge of her new beginning, a place filled with uncertainty, but also brimming with possibility. The pain of betrayal and heartbreak still lingered in her heart, but it no longer held her captive. She had spent years building her life around Samuel and his lies, and now it was time to build something entirely new, something that was hers and hers alone. Her journey was not one of immediate triumph, but of slow, steady progress as she took each day one step at a time, knowing the path would not be easy, but it was hers to walk. She focused on healing, on rediscovering who she was outside of the confines of her former life. It wasn't just about moving on, it was about moving forward. Jennifer threw herself into causes that mattered, particularly advocating for women's rights. Her own experiences of betrayal and the pain she had endured fueled her desire to help others who had suffered the same. She became a voice for the voiceless, offering support and hope to those who had been silenced by their own personal storms. The process was transformative. Jennifer was no longer defined by her failed marriage or by Samuel's lies. She was defining herself. She discovered an inner strength she never knew she had, a resilience that grew with every challenge she faced. With determination, she built a business from the ground up, not just as a means to support her children, but as a testament to her own capabilities. She poured her heart into her work, creating a future for her children that would be different from the past they had left behind. Jennifer's journey was not one of isolation. She found strength in community. As she built her business, she also built relationships with other women and families who had been affected by Samuel's actions. They shared their stories, their pain, and their hopes for a better future. Together, they formed a network of support and empowerment. Jennifer was instrumental in helping to expose the corruption at the fertility clinic where Samuel had orchestrated the lies that shattered so many lives, including her own. Her efforts led to investigations that brought accountability to the clinic and its staff. For the first time in years, Jennifer felt as though she was part of something bigger than herself. She was not just rebuilding her life, she was contributing to the rebuilding of others' lives as well. She found purpose in helping others heal, and in turn, her own healing deepened. The journey was far from over, but Jennifer had found her footing. She had discovered that true strength lies not in perfection, but in the ability to rise after every fall. Now, as she looked toward the future, she knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, she would face them with courage, hope, and an unshakable belief in herself. As Jennifer stood in the quiet of her new office, the weight of everything she had overcome settled within her. She reflected on the path that had led her here, from the woman who once defined herself by her role as a wife to a woman who now reclaimed her power and her truth. The years of living in the shadows of Samuel's lies felt like a distant memory, each step toward independence and self-worth a victory she never thought she would achieve. She had been the perfect wife in her eyes, doing everything to please the man she had loved, but in the process, she had lost herself. Now, standing alone in her own space, she realized how far she had come. It was a journey that had been anything but easy, filled with pain, self-doubt, and heartbreak. But as she gazed at the reflection in the glass before her, she saw someone stronger, more determined than ever before. She had been through hell, yet somehow she had emerged not just unscathed, but more powerful. The lies, the betrayal, the silence, none of it had been able to break her. What it had done, instead, was reveal her inner strength and the fierce love she had for her children and herself. Jennifer had come to understand that she no longer needed anyone else to define her. Her worth was no longer tied to the approval of others or the love of a man who never truly saw her. It was hers to claim, and she had done just that. The woman she was becoming was someone who had faced the darkest days of her life and had decided that those days would not define her future. In that quiet moment, a final wave of empowerment washed over her. She realized that, though her life was still complicated, it was finally authentic. It was hers to shape, hers to navigate, and no longer would she be held back by the expectations of others. She had learned that her story was not over, but a new chapter was just beginning, one where she had control, strength, and the courage to keep moving forward. And in that reflection, Jennifer knew that if she could rise from the ashes of her past, so could anyone else trapped in a similar situation. There was hope, even in the darkest moments, and the strength to change was always within reach.